Welcome. You are here now, and that is the only thing that matters tonight. There is nothing else required of you. Nothing waiting, nothing unfinished, nothing that needs your attention before morning. You have arrived at the end of your day, and the end of the day is a soft and generous place, a place that belongs entirely to rest, entirely to you, entirely to the simple and unhurried process of letting go of everything you have been carrying and allowing your body and your mind to do what they already know how to do, which is to rest, deeply and completely, without any effort from you at all. Take a moment to feel where you are. Feel the surface beneath you, the bed, the pillow, the blanket. Feel how it holds you, how it accepts your weight without any resistance, how it has been waiting for you all day and is entirely glad you are here. Feel the weight of your body pressing down into that surface, and let yourself press down a little more, releasing whatever small tension you might still be holding, letting gravity do its quiet work, letting you be heavy and still and completely supported. Your shoulders can drop now, just a little more than they are. Your jaw can unclench, if it has been clenching without you noticing, which it sometimes does. The muscles around your eyes can soften. Your hands can open, your fingers can uncurl, your arms can lie flat and still and completely without purpose. There is nothing for your hands to do tonight. There is nothing for any part of you to do tonight, except to rest. Tonight I am going to tell you about a world that is very, very far away. A world separated from you by 2,000 years of time, by an ocean and a continent, by every generation that has lived and breathed and gone to sleep since then. It is the world of ancient Rome, not the Rome of battles and emperors and great events that you may have read about in books, but the other Rome, the quieter Rome, the Rome of ordinary people living ordinary days. The Rome of bread baking in clay ovens, of water flowing in stone channels, of oil lamps burning in low-ceilinged rooms, of sandaled feet on warm stone streets, of a city going about its slow, repetitive, deeply ordinary business on a warm afternoon 2,000 years ago. There is nothing alarming in this story. There is no drama. There is no conflict. There is only the warmth of the ancient city, and the sound of it, and the smell of it, and the slow, unhurried lives of the people who lived in it, going about their days in the same quiet way that people have always gone about their days, in every time and every place, doing what needs doing, eating their bread, tending their fires, lying down at the end of the day and closing their eyes. You do not need to remember anything I tell you tonight. You do not need to learn anything. You do not need to follow every word. Simply let the story wash over you, the way warm water washes over you, the way warmth from a fire reaches you without you having to reach toward it, simply arriving, simply there, simply good. Before we go to Rome, take one slow breath. Breathe in gently through your nose, feeling your chest and your belly rise just slightly, and then breathe out, long and even and completely, through your mouth, letting everything go with that breath. Every thought you were carrying, every small unresolved thing, every plan and every worry and every piece of the day that has been following you around. Just breathe it all out, slowly, and let the next breath come in clean and easy, and let the one after that come even more slowly, and let your breathing settle into its own natural rhythm, which is the right rhythm, which has always been the right rhythm, which requires nothing from you except that you allow it to continue. Your body is growing heavier now. Your legs are heavy. Your arms are heavy. The back of your head is heavy against your pillow, pressing down softly into it, the pillow accepting that weight completely. There is a warmth gathering in your body, the warmth of rest beginning, the warmth of the day releasing, the warmth of a body that is doing exactly what it is meant to do at this hour. Let that warmth be there. Let it spread from the center of you outward, slowly, the way warmth from a hearth spreads through a room. Not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily, gently, reaching every corner in its own time. The world of ancient Rome is waiting for us, just ahead, in the warm morning light of a summer day 2,000 years ago. The city is already awake. It has been awake for hours, actually, because Rome woke early, its streets busy before dawn with the carts and wagons that were not allowed to enter during daylight hours. But those busy hours are already past, and now it is mid-morning, and the city is settling into the long, warm, unhurried middle of its day, and that is where we are going. We are going to a street in Rome called an Insula, a narrow street lined with tall apartment buildings, where most of the ordinary people of Rome lived their ordinary lives. Not the grand houses of the wealthy, with their fountains and gardens and mosaic floors, but the simpler buildings where bakers and craftsmen and shopkeepers and their families lived in small rooms stacked one above the other, where the smell of cooking and bread and olive oil drifted from window to window, where the sound of the street came up from below, and the sound of neighbors came through the walls, and where life was lived simply and closely and without any particular drama. Let yourself settle into that world now. It is warm there. The stone of the buildings holds the warmth of the summer morning. The air smells of bread and dust and something green from the herbs growing in clay pots on the windowsills. The sky above the narrow street is a deep, clear, uncomplicated blue. And somewhere below, in the street, water runs in the stone channel that carries it through the city, and the sound of it is a soft, continuous, entirely pleasant sound, like a voice that is always saying the same quiet thing. The Insula stands 4 stories tall, its outer walls of pale brick and cream-colored plaster, the plaster worn and slightly stained in places from years of weather and the closeness of other buildings. The street it faces is narrow, perhaps 10 feet wide, paved with large, irregular stones of dark volcanic rock, worn smooth over centuries of feet and carts into a surface that is almost glossy in the places where the most feet have passed. The stones fit together without mortar, their edges meeting in irregular lines, the gaps between them filled with the fine dark dust of the city. Along the base of the Insula, on the street level, there are several small shops, taberni, they are called, each one a single room opening directly onto the street, its wide front entirely open during business hours, the goods or the work of each shop spilling slightly out onto the pavement. One is a bakery. One sells olives and oil from large clay vessels set into a stone counter. One is a cobbler's shop, very small, with a low bench and the smell of leather coming out of it into the warm street air. The bakery is the most present of these shops, the most aromatic. The oven has been burning since before dawn, and the bread that was baked in those early hours is already sold, already in the homes of the people who came to buy it in the first light of the morning. But the oven is still warm, always warm, and a second batch of smaller loaves has been put in, and the smell of them baking moves out of the bakery and into the street and up through the windows of the building above, a warm, yeasty, deeply familiar smell that is simply the smell of the city, the smell of bread, the smell of something that has been baking in ovens in this place for longer than anyone alive can remember. Above the shops, the upper floors of the Insula rise in a series of small apartments, rooms, really, each 1 or 2 rooms where a family or a person or perhaps 2 people live their entire domestic lives. The walls between apartments are thin. The floors and ceilings are of wood, thick planks, slightly uneven, smoothed by long use. The rooms are small and low and warm in summer, cold in winter, always slightly dim because the windows are small and the street is narrow and the opposite building is close enough that in some rooms the direct sunlight enters only at certain hours of the day. We are going to spend our time today in one of these apartments, on the 2nd floor of this Insula, in the rooms of a woman named Lucia, who is a baker's wife, who has lived in these rooms for many years, who knows every inch of them and every sound of the building and every smell of the street, and whose day is already well underway. Lucia is perhaps 35 years old, with dark hair pinned at the back of her head in the simple way of an ordinary Roman woman going about her ordinary work, not the elaborate arrangement of the wealthy women who sit for hours while their slaves dress their hair, but a simple, practical gathering of dark hair held with 2 bone pins, neat and unremarkable. She is wearing a plain linen tunic, a long, loose garment that falls to her ankles, belted loosely at the waist with a length of woven wool, the linen a natural cream color, slightly worn but clean. Over this, in the slightly cool of the morning before the day's warmth has fully built, she has a lightweight wool palla draped over her shoulders and arms, a simple rectangle of soft gray-brown wool, folded and draped without any fastening, held in place by her arm and by habit. She is standing at the window of the main room of her apartment, looking down at the street below. The window is not large, perhaps 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall, with no glass, just the open air and the wooden shutter pushed back flat against the outer wall. She is looking at nothing in particular. She is simply standing at the window the way people stand at windows when the morning is well established and the most pressing tasks of the early hours have been done, and there is a moment, just a brief quiet moment, before the next thing begins. Below her, the street is doing what the street does at this hour of the morning. A man with a mule loaded with clay amphorae is moving slowly along the pavement, the mule's feet making a particular sound on the stone, a soft, slightly hollow, 4-beat sound, patient and steady. 2 women are standing near the olive oil shop, talking in low voices, not urgently, just talking, their hands occasionally moving in the small gestures of ordinary conversation. A child runs past them, quickly, for no particular reason, the way children sometimes run, and then is gone around the corner, and the street is quiet again. Lucia turns from the window and goes back to the table. The table is in the center of the room, a low, solid table of dark wood with thick legs, its surface worn smooth and slightly stained from years of meals and work. On it there are several things: a clay bowl with a cloth over it, a small clay oil lamp that is not currently burning, a knife, a wooden board with the crumbs from the morning bread still on it, and a bunch of fresh herbs that Lucia bought from the market earlier this morning, thyme and rosemary, and a few sprigs of something with small dark leaves that smell sharp and clean when you crush them between your fingers. She sits down at the table and takes the cloth off the clay bowl. Inside the bowl, covered and resting since early morning, is a quantity of olives, black olives, brought up from the shop below, a small quantity that the baker gave her in exchange for some help she gave his wife last week. A quiet transaction of the kind that happens constantly in this building and in this street, the small economy of neighbors. The olives are cured and slightly shiny, their skins wrinkled and soft, and they smell of brine and oil and something deep and faintly bitter that is simply the smell of olives, which is a smell that is everywhere in Rome, present in almost every kitchen and every meal. Lucia begins to work with the olives. She is going to remove their stones, a simple, repetitive task, the kind of task that the hands know how to do without the mind needing to be fully present. She takes each olive between her fingers, presses it slightly, feels the slight resistance and then the yielding, and works the stone out with a small practiced motion, dropping the stoned olive into a clean bowl and the stone into another. She does this one at a time, steadily, without hurry, her hands moving in the same small motion over and over. The room around her is quiet. From somewhere in the building she can hear sounds, someone moving above her, the creak of a floor beam, a very distant voice. But these sounds are simply the sounds of the building being a building, the sounds of other people living their lives in the rooms above and beside her, and they have always been there and require nothing from her. From the street below, the sounds of the street come up through the open window, the occasional voice, the sound of feet on stone, the distant sound of a cart somewhere further away in the city, the sound of water in the channel, always there, always the same. She works through the olives slowly. There are perhaps 40 or 50 of them in the bowl, and she works through them one at a time, and the work is very simple and takes just enough attention to occupy the hands without occupying the mind, which is a particular kind of work that is very restful, the kind that leaves the mind free to be empty or to wander gently wherever it wants to go. The morning light comes through the window at a low angle, falling across the table in a warm, pale bar, catching the surface of the oil on the olives so that they glisten slightly. The light moves very slowly, barely perceptibly, as the sun continues its unhurried progress above the narrow street. Dust moves in the light, very slowly, suspended in the warm air of the room, drifting in one direction and then another, going nowhere in particular. Let yourself drift with that dust now. Let your mind go where it wants to go, or let it go nowhere, which is also fine, which is perhaps better. There is nothing to think about. There is nothing to figure out. There is only the warm room and the quiet sounds and the slow repetitive work of Lucia's hands, and the dust in the light, and the smell of olives and herbs and the distant warm smell of bread from the bakery below. Your body is so heavy. Your breathing is so slow. Let yourself sink a little more into wherever you are lying, and let the sounds of the ancient city be there with you, softly, far away, like a dream that is just beginning to form at the very edge of sleep, warm and golden and entirely harmless, entirely good. Lucia finishes the olives. She puts the stoned olives in the small clay pot with a wooden lid that she will keep them in, and covers them with a little oil from the small amphora on the shelf, the oil flowing in a thin, golden, completely even stream from the tilted vessel, covering the olives, the smell of it fresh and clean. She puts the lid on the pot and sets it on the shelf beside the other small pots and vessels that line one wall of the room, a row of clay containers of different sizes and shapes, each with a lid or a stopper, each containing something: dried beans, lentils, salt, dried figs, the olive oil, a small amount of garum, which is a fermented fish sauce that Romans use the way people now use salt, in almost everything. The shelf is a plain wooden shelf, mounted to the wall with iron brackets, its surface stained and darkened from long use. The pots on it are plain and practical. No decoration, no particular beauty, just the functional shapes that clay takes when someone makes a pot for the purpose of holding things, rounded and smooth, their surfaces unglazed, a warm terracotta color that absorbs the light rather than reflecting it. They have sat on this shelf for years. They will sit there for years more. They are simply there, as useful and unremarkable as the shelf they sit on, as the wall behind them, as the room itself. Lucia wipes her hands on a cloth, and stands and goes to the small brazier in the corner of the room. The brazier is a shallow clay vessel on 3 legs, filled with charcoal, used for heating food and warming the room in winter. In summer it is used only for cooking small things, heating water, warming bread, simmering a small sauce. This morning she wants to heat water for the herbs she bought at the market. She places a few pieces of charcoal in the brazier from the small clay container beside it, and lights them with a piece of tinder. A slow, careful process, holding the tinder near the charcoal until it glows and transfers its heat, blowing very gently, watching the charcoal begin to catch. The smoke from the charcoal rises in a thin, gray column, going up toward the ceiling and then drifting toward the window, which draws it out into the open air. The smell of the charcoal is a clean, mineral smell, familiar and unremarkable. When the charcoal is burning adequately, she sets the small clay pot of water over it on its 3-legged stand and waits. The water will take a few minutes to heat. She goes back to the table and picks up the bunch of herbs and begins to pull the leaves from the stems. Small, deliberate motions, pinching the stem below each cluster of leaves and pulling downward, the leaves coming free and falling onto the wooden board. The rosemary she strips in one long motion along each stem, the small, needle-like leaves falling in a soft pile. The time she picks more carefully, the leaves very small, each one barely the size of a fingernail, falling from the stem in tiny increments. The smell of the herbs fills the small room, a bright, sharp, clean smell, the rosemary particularly strong, the kind of smell that seems to clear the air around it, to make the air itself seem lighter and cleaner. Lucia breathes it in without thinking about breathing it in, because this smell is simply the smell of preparing food, the smell of the kitchen, the smell of ordinary life in this room. The water is heating. She can hear it beginning to move in the pot. The very first, very faint sound of warming water, barely audible, just a slight trembling of the surface of the liquid, not yet bubbling, not yet boiling, just beginning. She does not look at the pot. She knows the sequence of sounds the water makes as it heats, and she will hear when it is ready. She finishes stripping the herbs and gathers the leaves on the board, and picks up the knife. A plain iron knife with a wooden handle worn smooth, the blade slightly curved from years of sharpening, and begins to chop them. The knife moves through the herbs in slow, even strokes, the chopping a soft, rhythmic sound on the wooden board, the herbs releasing more of their smell with each cut, the smell intensifying with the cutting, becoming fuller and richer and more present in the air of the room. The water in the pot begins to sing. That low, continuous, slightly trembling sound of water that is warm but not yet at the boil. The sound that means the process is well underway, that the heat has reached through the water and the water is responding. Lucia sets down her knife and picks up the pot with a cloth wrapped around its handle and pours the hot water over the chopped herbs in the bowl. The water darkening immediately as it hits the herbs, taking on their color, the steam rising from the bowl carrying the smell of the herbs up into the air of the room in a warm, fragrant cloud. She covers the bowl with the cloth to let the herbs steep and goes to the window again. Below in the street, the olive oil seller is arranging her goods. The large clay amphorae set into the stone counter of her shop, each one in its permanent place, each one containing a different oil or a different quantity of the same oil. The woman moves slowly, straightening a cloth, adjusting the position of a small clay cup. She does not hurry. There is no reason to hurry. The customers will come when they come. On the opposite side of the narrow street, in the building across from the Insula, a man is sitting in a doorway on a low wooden stool, working with his hands. Lucia can see from her window that he is weaving something, a basket perhaps, or a length of rush matting, his hands moving in the slow, regular, over and under motion of weaving, his head bent slightly, his attention entirely on his work. He has been sitting in this doorway most mornings for as long as Lucia can remember. He is always there, always weaving, always in the same posture, always at the same pace. He is part of the street the way the stones are part of the street. Lucia watches the street for a little while. The sun has moved higher now. She can tell by the way the shadows have shifted below, the stripe of sunlight on the pavement narrower than it was an hour ago, the shade of the buildings deeper on both sides. The day is moving through its middle hours in its own way, at its own pace, and the city is going about its business, and the business of the city on an ordinary summer morning is simply the continuation of itself. The same things happening in the same places in the same order, as they do every day, as they will do tomorrow. The herbs have steeped long enough. Lucia lifts the cloth and looks at the bowl. The liquid is a warm, slightly greenish-brown, fragrant and steaming still, though the steam is thinner now than it was. She pours a small amount into a plain clay cup and wraps her hands around the cup and breathes in the steam. The smell of it is rosemary and thyme and something warm and slightly medicinal, the smell of herbs that have given their essence to the hot water, that have become part of it. She sits at the table with the cup and drinks slowly, in small sips, each sip very small, the liquid warm enough to feel its warmth spreading gently from the throat downward. She does not think about anything in particular while she drinks. She looks at the table. She looks at the window. She looks at the pattern the morning light makes on the plaster wall, a bright, irregular shape that shifts very slowly as the sun moves, its edges sharp where the light comes through the window frame and softer where it is reflected from a surface. The building is quiet at this hour. Earlier there was more sound. The bakery below has been busy since before dawn, and the sounds of it, the scraping of the large wooden peel moving loaves in and out of the oven, the voices of the bakers calling to each other, the sound of the stone mill grinding, have been part of the morning. But now the main baking is done and the bakery is quieter, the oven still hot but no longer working at its hardest, and the sounds from below are reduced to the occasional movement and the low, comfortable sound of the fire in the oven, which never quite goes out. She finishes the herb water. She sets the cup down and rests her hands in her lap and sits for a moment, simply sitting. The room is warm. The air is fragrant with herbs and the distant smell of bread. The street sounds are there, below, continuous and unhurried. Everything is ordinary. Everything is as it should be. There is nothing that needs her attention right now, and she allows herself to simply be here, in this room, in this warmth, in this completely ordinary moment. Let yourself be here too. Let yourself be in this room, in this warmth, in this ordinary moment. You are so still. You are so heavy. Your breathing is so slow and so easy, in and out, the same slow rhythm that has been breathing you all your life, that is breathing you now, that will breathe you through the rest of this night and into the morning, without any help from you, without any effort, simply continuing as it has always continued. The ancient city is there around you, warm and slow, its sounds drifting past without demanding anything, its smells present and familiar and good, bread and oil and herbs and the clean warm smell of stone heated by the sun. 2,000 years is a very long distance, but at this hour, in this warm room, in this slow drift toward sleep, the distance means nothing. There is only the warmth, and the quiet, and the slow, steady continuation of an ordinary day. In the street below Lucia's window, the morning is advancing toward noon. The light on the pavement has shifted again, the stripe of sunlight narrower still, the shadows of the buildings falling more directly downward as the sun approaches its highest point. The air is warmer now. The smell of the street is warmer, the dust of the stone pavement, the oil from the shop, the bread from the bakery, the occasional smell of a cooking fire from somewhere in the building, someone's midday meal beginning. A vendor moves slowly along the street, carrying a wide, flat basket on her head with practiced ease, a basket of figs, fresh figs from the market, very dark and soft, beginning to open at their tips. She calls as she walks, a low, unhurried call, not shouting, just making herself known, the sound of it carrying just far enough for the people in the nearby windows and doorways to hear. She moves slowly, unhurriedly, one foot in front of the other on the old stone, the basket perfectly balanced on her head without her hands, her arms hanging loose at her sides. Lucia hears the fig vendor and goes to the window and calls down, and a small transaction takes place. A few coins in exchange for a handful of figs passed up in a small cloth, Lucia leaning out just slightly, the vendor standing in the street below looking up with a plain, unhurried expression, both of them conducting this exchange with the ease of people who have done it many times before. The figs are warm from the morning sun, warm in Lucia's hand, the skin very soft, slightly sticky, the smell of them sweet and rich and full. She puts them in the clay bowl on the table and looks at them for a moment. She will eat them later, at the midday meal, perhaps with bread and a little oil, perhaps with some of the olives she prepared this morning. The midday meal in Rome is not the main meal of the day. That comes later, in the afternoon, the cena, which is the meal that matters. But the midday meal is pleasant nonetheless, simple and good, eaten in the warmth of the day in whatever quiet is available. She goes about the rest of her morning tasks. She sweeps the floor, a plain clay and stone floor, its surface worn smooth, slightly uneven in places, and the sweeping is a slow, rhythmic back-and-forth motion with a short-handled broom of tied grass, the sound of it a soft, regular whisper on the floor surface, the dust gathering before the broom in a small, obedient line. She sweeps from the back of the room toward the door, which stands open onto the small landing at the top of the stairs, and she sweeps the dust out the door, and it drifts down the stairs and disappears. She straightens the few pieces of furniture in the room, the table, the 2 low wooden stools, the small chest against one wall that holds folded textiles and the few personal objects that belong to the household. She wipes the table surface with a damp cloth, the cloth moving in slow, even circles, the surface darkening slightly where it is wet and then returning to its warm wooden color as it dries. She folds the palla she was wearing earlier and sets it on the chest. These tasks take perhaps half an hour, done at the pace she always does them, which is the pace of someone who has no particular reason to hurry and who has learned over years of doing these same tasks that hurrying them does not make them better and only makes the time feel shorter, which is not actually an advantage. There will always be more tasks. The tasks do not diminish by hurrying through them. Better to do each one completely, at its own pace, and then go on to the next. By the time the morning tasks are done, the sun has reached its highest point and the narrow street outside the window is almost entirely in shadow, the sunlight reduced to a thin bright line along the very top of the opposite building. The air is warm, genuinely warm now, the kind of warmth that summer brings to Rome, a deep, heavy warmth that settles into the stone of the buildings during the day and radiates back out through the afternoon and evening. It is not uncomfortable. It is simply warm, in the way that summer in a Mediterranean city is warm, with the particular quality of heat that has stone in it, that has dust in it, that has the smell of dry earth and olive trees somewhere behind all the city smells. Lucia prepares the midday meal. She brings up a small loaf of bread from the bakery below, one of the smaller, second batch loaves that her husband sets aside for the household, dense and still warm from the oven, its crust dark and firm. She cuts it on the board, slow, careful cuts, the knife moving through the crust with a slight resistance and through the softer interior more easily, the bread falling in thick slices that are slightly irregular because the knife is not perfectly straight and the board is not perfectly level, and neither of these things matters. She arranges the figs on the board beside the bread, their dark skins splitting slightly at the pressure of the knife when she cuts 2 of them open, revealing the deep pink interior with its pattern of small seeds, the smell of them intensifying when they are opened. She drizzles a small amount of oil over the bread from the little amphora, a thin, golden, fragrant stream, the oil sinking immediately into the bread's surface, darkening it. She adds a handful of the stoned olives from the clay pot on the shelf. This is the midday meal. It is the same as it often is, bread and oil and olives and whatever fruit is in season, eaten at the table, simply, without ceremony. She sits down and eats without hurry, in the warm and quiet of the room, the sounds of the street below slightly reduced at this hour because many people in Rome take their midday rest now, withdrawing from the heat into the shade of their rooms, lying down, closing their eyes, letting the hottest part of the day pass in the comfortable darkness of shuttered rooms. The midday rest is a Roman custom that Lucia observes faithfully. After the meal, she closes the wooden shutter on the window. Not all the way, just most of the way, leaving a narrow gap through which a thin bar of warm light enters and falls across the floor. The room is dimmer now and slightly cooler than it was, the air in the room still but no longer moving with the occasional breath of street air that came through the open window. She lies down on the sleeping couch that stands along one wall, a low wooden frame with a wool-stuffed mattress, covered with a linen sheet that is smooth and slightly cool against her skin when she first lies down. She lies on her back, her arms at her sides, and closes her eyes. The sounds of the city at midday are different from the sounds of the morning. Fewer voices, fewer cart sounds, fewer footsteps. There is still the water in the channel, always there. It sounds slightly more audible now that the street is quieter. There is the distant sound of the city continuing its life somewhere further away. Rome does not entirely stop at midday, only rests partially, the way a very large thing rests, incompletely, with most of its mass still going about its business. Lucia lies still on the couch. Her eyes are closed. The thin bar of light from the shutter gap moves very slowly across the floor as the afternoon advances. The smell of the room is warm and familiar, the lingering herbs, the bread, the olive oil, the warm wool of the mattress, the particular smell of the plaster walls when they are warm, which is a dry, slightly chalky, completely neutral smell that simply says walls, says room, says home. She is not thinking about anything. Or she is thinking about something very small and very ordinary, something that does not require her full attention, that drifts through her the way the afternoon drifts through the room, slowly, without urgency, without going anywhere. Let yourself drift now. Let yourself lie down with Lucia in the warm afternoon of the ancient city, in the dim, shuttered room, in the warmth and the quiet. You are lying down. You are warm. Your eyes are closed or closing. There is nothing you need to do. There is nothing that needs your attention. There is only the warmth and the darkness and the slow, easy rhythm of your breathing, in and out, the same breath that has always breathed you, continuing now as it always does, without effort, without end. The city is there, outside the shuttered window, continuing its afternoon. A man is sleeping on a bench in a small courtyard nearby, his arm over his eyes to block the light, his chest rising and falling very slowly. A dog lies in the shade of a doorway, its nose on its paws, its eyes half open and seeing nothing in particular. The olive oil seller has pulled her own wooden shutter halfway across the front of her shop and is sitting in the shade at the back of it. Not working, just sitting, her hands in her lap, her eyes at rest. The water in the street channel runs on. It has been running since before anyone in this street was born. This water, flowing through the stone channel from the aqueduct that brings it from the hills outside the city, and it will run after everyone in this street is gone. And it runs now through the quiet of the Roman afternoon with the same calm persistence it has always had, making its soft, continuous sound on the stone. A cat walks slowly along the top of the garden wall visible from the upper floors of the Insula, a narrow wall enclosing the small shared garden at the back of the building, where a fig tree grows and some herbs in clay pots and a small stone basin catches rainwater. The cat walks with the particular slow, deliberate grace of a cat that has nowhere to be, its tail held straight up, its paws placed with precision on the narrow top of the wall, and then it reaches the end of the wall and steps down out of sight, and the wall is empty again. The afternoon deepens. The light inside the room, even through the shuttered gap, is changing, the angle of it shifting, the bar of light moving along the floor toward the wall, its color warming very slightly from the white of midday toward the more golden quality of mid-afternoon. Lucia has been resting for perhaps an hour. She has not slept, or perhaps she drifted for a little while without knowing it, that particular kind of resting that is not quite sleep but is more than wakefulness, where the thoughts become very soft and the body becomes very still and time passes without being tracked. She rises slowly. She pushes the shutter open again and the warm afternoon light comes into the room, fuller than before, more golden. She smooths the linen on the sleeping couch and goes to the water jug on the shelf and pours a small amount into the basin and washes her face and hands, the water cool against her face, pleasantly so, cutting through the heat of the room. She dries her face on the linen cloth and feels the coolness of the water and the warmth of the room together, and the combination is simply pleasant, is simply the texture of the afternoon. The afternoon's tasks are different from the morning's. In the afternoon, Lucia goes out, to the market, to the bathhouse, to visit her neighbor on the floor above, to do whatever the afternoon requires of her. Today she is going to the market to buy the things she needs for the cena, the evening meal, which is the main meal of the day and which she prepares with more care than the simple midday bread and olives. She pins her hair again, it has come slightly loose during the midday rest, and drapes her palla over her shoulders and goes to the door and down the stairs. The stairs of the Insula are narrow and wooden, the treads worn in their centers, the banister a smoothed wooden rail that her hand finds automatically as she descends. The sounds of the building are present on the stairs, voices from behind closed doors, the sound of a child somewhere above, the smell of other people's cooking already beginning, though it is still early for the cena. The street at mid-afternoon is busier than it was at midday. The rest period is over and the city has returned to its afternoon business, the streets filling again with the ordinary traffic of people going about their ordinary things. Lucia steps out from the Insula into the street and joins this traffic, moving at the pace of the street, which is the pace of people who have somewhere to go but are not in a hurry to get there. The market, the forum, the local market square, not the great forum Romanum which is far across the city, is a few minutes' walk from the Insula, through 3 or 4 narrow streets that Lucia knows entirely by memory, her feet finding their way without her thinking about it. The streets are shaded at this hour by the tall buildings on either side, and the shade is welcome in the afternoon heat. The pavement under her sandals is warm, the volcanic stone holding the heat of the day, releasing it slowly, and slightly uneven in places where the stones have settled over the years. She passes a fountain at a street corner, a plain stone basin set into the wall, fed by a pipe from the water system, the water spilling over the edge of the basin into a drain at the base. A boy is filling a clay jug at the fountain, holding the jug under the flow of water, the jug filling slowly, the sound of the water against the clay, a hollow, round sound. He does not look up as Lucia passes. The market square is a wide, open space paved with flat stones, surrounded on 3 sides by a colonnade of plain stone columns under which the market stalls are arranged. The stalls are simple, wooden boards on trestles, or sometimes just goods arranged on cloth spread on the ground, and they sell what the market always sells at this season: vegetables in their summer abundance, herbs, dried goods, cheese, fish from the river and from the sea, a few stalls with pottery and simple household goods, one man selling sandals from a low bench. Lucia moves through the market at her own pace, stopping at the stalls she knows, passing the ones she does not need today. She buys a bunch of leeks, their white and pale green stems bundled together with a strip of grass, their smell clean and slightly onion-like. She buys a small piece of salt pork wrapped in a broad leaf. She buys a handful of dried lentils from a woman who measures them out in a small clay cup, tipping the cup into Lucia's own cloth bag, the lentils falling in a dry, rattling, satisfying sound. She considers the fish and decides against it today. She picks up a small ceramic oil lamp from the potter's stall. Hers has a crack in the base that has been letting oil seep through, and she has been meaning to replace it for several days, and turns it over in her hands, looking at the base, the quality of the clay, the evenness of the hole for the wick. It is a plain thing, functional, inexpensive, adequate. She pays for it and puts it in her bag. The market is not loud. It has the sound of a busy place that is not a chaotic place. Voices, transactions, the movement of people, the occasional braying of a donkey from somewhere behind the market, but all of this at a level that is simply the level of ordinary activity, ordinary life. Nobody is shouting. Nobody is in a hurry. The vendors call their goods in moderate, unhurried voices. The customers examine and consider and pay and move on. And the whole market has the texture of a thing that has been happening in this square every day for a very long time and sees no particular reason to happen any differently today. Lucia finishes her purchases and leaves the market and walks back through the shaded streets to the Insula. The afternoon light, where it falls between the buildings, is warmer and more golden than it was. The day is advancing toward its evening. The warmth in the street has a different quality now than the midday warmth. Heavier, more settled, the warmth of a day that has been warm for many hours and has soaked into the stone and the plaster and the air and is not going anywhere quickly. Back in the apartment, she sets her purchases on the table and takes off her palla and hangs it on the peg and begins the preparation of the evening meal. The cena is the most important meal of the day for most Romans. It is eaten in the late afternoon or early evening, and for ordinary people like Lucia and her husband it is a simple meal, but prepared with care, eaten at the table, the day's main nourishment. She puts the lentils in a pot with water and sets the pot on the brazier, which she builds up with fresh charcoal. The lentils will need to cook for a long time, perhaps 2 hours, simmering slowly, the water absorbing into them, the lentils softening from their hard, dry, almost woody initial state into something soft and yielding and full of the warmth of the cooking water and whatever she adds to it as it cooks. While the lentils begin their long slow cooking, she prepares the leeks, washing them in a basin of water, the water immediately going slightly murky and then clearer as she rinses them, the outer layers peeling back to reveal the clean white interior, the smell of them clean and familiar. She cuts them, the knife through the leeks making a soft, clean sound, the leeks falling into pale rings and half rings, their layers loosening slightly as they are cut. She adds them to the pot with the lentils. The salt pork she cuts into small pieces and adds to the pot. She adds a little garum, the pungent fish sauce that serves as seasoning for almost everything, and some of the chopped rosemary left over from the morning. She stirs it all together with a long wooden spoon and puts the lid on the pot and reduces the charcoal to a slower burn, suitable for the long simmering that will bring the whole thing together into the thick, warm, savory stew that is the evening meal. The apartment fills with the smell of the cooking. It is a different smell from the morning herbs, richer, heavier, more savory, the smell of pork and leeks and lentils beginning to give their flavors to each other and to the cooking water. The smell moves out through the open window and into the air of the stairwell and into the street, where it joins the smells of other cooking from other apartments and from the shops below and from the buildings across the street, all of them preparing their own versions of the same meal at the same hour, and the collective smell of all that cooking is simply the smell of the city at supper time, the smell that has been rising from these streets every evening for centuries. Lucia sits down at the table while the pot simmers. She has a small piece of work to do, mending a tear in one of the household linens that she has been carrying with her in the small basket near the door. She takes it out now and threads her bone needle with the undyed linen thread and begins to mend the tear with small, even stitches, the needle moving in and out of the cloth in its regular rhythm, the thread pulling through cleanly, the stitches accumulating one by one into a neat, strong repair. The mending is the same kind of work as the olive pitting earlier, simple, repetitive, requiring just enough attention to occupy the hands while the mind rests. She works slowly, without hurry, each stitch placed carefully, the needle going in just the right distance from the tear, the thread pulled just tight enough, the whole repair building up gradually into something that will hold, that will last, that will make the linen useful again. Outside the window the evening is beginning. The golden afternoon light is softening and lengthening, the shadows growing longer on the pavement, the color of the stone shifting in that particular way it shifts in the late afternoon of a summer day when the sun is low but still above the horizon. The street is quieter than it was earlier in the afternoon. The market is closed. Many people have returned to their homes for the cena. The city is drawing itself inward, the way it does every evening, the public life of the streets giving way to the private life of the rooms. Let the evening come now. Let it come the way it comes in Rome, slowly, warmly, with the smell of cooking and the sound of the city settling into its nighttime quiet. Your body is so heavy. Your breathing is so slow. The warm, golden light of the Roman evening is there, somewhere behind your closed eyes, warm and distant and entirely harmless, entirely good. Lucia's husband comes home. He climbs the stairs with the solid, tired step of a man who has been on his feet since before dawn, and comes through the door, and the apartment shifts slightly in its texture from the quiet of Lucia's solitary afternoon to the quiet of two people in the same space. He is a solidly built man, not tall, with flour dust still visible in his hair and on his forearms despite having washed at the end of the working day. He says something brief to Lucia, not exciting, not dramatic, just the ordinary words of a person returning home, and she answers with something equally brief, equally ordinary, and then he sits at the table and she stirs the pot and the evening continues. They eat the cena together at the table. The lentil and leek and pork stew is thick and savory, ladled into wide clay bowls, eaten with bread from the bakery. Fresh bread, the last of the day's baking, and a small amount of wine mixed with water in plain clay cups. The meal is simple. It has been made with care. It is eaten without ceremony, in the warm and slightly dim apartment, the oil lamp on the table giving it small, steady, warm light. After eating, Lucia clears the bowls and the husband sits for a while at the table, doing nothing in particular, his hands resting on the table, his eyes somewhere on the middle distance. The day is done for him. The bakery has been closed and cleaned, the ovens banked for the night, the flour measured for tomorrow's first bake. Tomorrow it will all begin again, as it does every day, as it has done every day for years, as it will do for years more. But tonight the day is done. The city outside is quieter now. The evening is well advanced. The sky above the narrow street, visible through the open window as a strip of deep blue, is darkening toward night. The first stars are not yet visible, but they will be soon. The lamp in the apartment is burning steadily, its small flame perfectly still in the still air of the room. giving its warm, amber light to the table and the walls and the faces of the two people sitting in it. From somewhere in the building, a child's voice, sleepy, calling something once. A low adult voice answering. And then quiet again. The water in the street channel runs on, as it always does, as it always will. The smell of other people's cooking lingers in the building's air, mixing with the smell of their own meal, the whole building carrying the collective warmth of its inhabitants, the warmth of fires and lamps and bodies and food, all of it held inside the thick brick and plaster walls, radiating back softly through the night. Lucia cleans the pot and the bowls, rinsing them with a small amount of water, wiping them with the cloth, setting them on the shelf in their places. She moves through the kitchen tasks of the evening in the same unhurried way she has moved through all the tasks of the day, each one done fully, each one done at its own pace, each one simply the continuation of the same long, ordinary, quietly satisfying rhythm that is the texture of her days. Her husband has gone to the sleeping room, a smaller room behind the main room, just large enough for the sleeping couch and a chest, dim and warm. She can hear the sounds of him settling, the creak of the wooden frame, the shift of the mattress. She finishes the last of the evening tasks. She turns down the oil lamp, pressing the small lever that lowers the wick, watching the flame diminish, become smaller, smaller, a tiny point of warm light, and then gone. The room is dark except for the faint gray-blue of the night sky through the window. She goes to the window one last time before sleeping. The narrow street below is nearly empty. A single lamp burns in the doorway of a building further along the street, one of the lanterns that the city requires to be kept burning through the night. Its small flame absolutely still in the calm night air, its light barely reaching the pavement, just a small pool of warm amber against the dark stone. The sky above the street is dark now, and the stars are there. Not many, in the narrow strip of sky visible between the buildings, but there, small and bright and very still. They are the same stars that are above the city tonight, above all the sleeping rooftops and the temples and the forums and the long straight roads leading out through the gates into the countryside beyond. The same stars that have been above this city every clear night since before the city existed, since there was nothing here but river and hills and the small beginning of what would become Rome. Lucia looks at the stars for a moment, or at the one or two of them visible in the strip of sky, and then she pulls the shutter closed and turns and goes to the sleeping room. She lies down on the couch beside her husband, who is already asleep or nearly so. She pulls the linen sheet over herself. She closes her eyes. The city is quiet around her. The water runs in its channel. The lamp burns in the distant doorway. The stars are there, above the rooftops, and in all the apartments of all the insulae of the great city, in all the small rooms where ordinary people have spent their ordinary days and eaten their ordinary meals and mended their linens and prepared their stews, the lights are going out one by one, and the people are lying down, and the city is breathing its deep, collective, entirely ordinary breath of sleep. Let the city sleep. Let it breathe. Let the 2,000 years between that city and this moment be as nothing. Just a distance, just a number, just a fact that has no weight or urgency tonight. You are lying down. You are warm. Your breathing is slow and even and completely effortless, happening all by itself, the way it has always happened, the way it will always happen. The streets of Rome are quiet now. The last of the nighttime carts have come and gone, doing their work of supply in the dark hours. The dogs that roam the city at night are somewhere in the shadows, invisible, their occasional sounds distant and unthreatening. The fountains run on. They always run, through the night and through the day, the water coming from the hills outside the city through the aqueducts, never stopping, never pausing, simply flowing as it has always flowed. In the bakery below Lucia's apartment, the oven is banked but not cold. The embers are there, held low, waiting for the baker who will come before dawn and build them back up and begin the first mixing of the morning dough. The flour is measured in its sacks. The wood is stacked. The long wooden peel hangs on its hook. Everything is ready for tomorrow, for the same tomorrow that comes every day, for the bread that will be baked and sold and eaten by the people of this street as it has been baked and sold and eaten every day. In the stable at the edge of the market, the donkeys and mules are still. In the temple on the hill, the priest is sleeping in his small room behind the sanctuary. In the bathhouse, closed now, its fires banked, the water in its pools still and warm and dark, No one moves. In the forum, the market stalls are empty, their boards put away, the square quiet in the moonlight, its paving stones pale and still. The moon has risen. It moves slowly over the rooftops of the city. A full moon, or nearly full, casting a silver-gray light over the highest points of the buildings, the tops of the columns, the ridges of the tile roofs, the upper courses of the stone walls. The shadows are deep and still in the streets below. The moon's light does not reach down into the narrow streets, but it is there above, moving in its patient arc across the dark sky, indifferent and beautiful, the same moon that moves above every city and every field and every sea on earth at this hour, the same moon that has always moved above everything. In Lucia's apartment, on the second floor of the Insula, everything is still. The shutters are closed. The lamp is out. The pot is clean on the shelf. The herbs hang dry from the rafter. The olives are in their clay pot under their film of oil. The mended linen is folded. The figs are eaten. The bread is eaten. The day is done, completely and without remainder, and there is nothing left of it but the quiet it has settled into, and the warmth it has left in the room, and the sleeping of the two people on the couch who have moved through this day as they move through every day, without drama, without urgency, without any event that history will notice or any moment that will be remembered by anyone beyond themselves. And yet the day was complete. And yet the day was enough. And yet the bread was good, and the herbs smelled good, and the evening meal was warm and savory, and the lamp gave its steady light, and the water in the street ran its quiet note through everything, and the stars were there above the rooftops, and the moon moved in its arc, and the city breathed, and two people lay down at the end of it and closed their eyes. You are so deeply still now. Your body is so heavy, so warm, so completely at rest. There is nothing pulling at you. There is nothing asking for your attention. The ancient city is there somewhere, far away, 2,000 years and an ocean and all of history away, but also somehow very close, very quiet, very warm. A city of ordinary people living ordinary days, their small tasks done, their lamps extinguished, their eyes closed, their breathing slow. Let your breathing be slow. Let it be even. Let it simply continue, as it always continues, without any effort from you, without any management or control, simply happening the way everything in nature simply happens. The water running, the moon moving, the stars burning, the bread rising, the fire finding its own level, everything going on in its own way at its own pace, none of it requiring anything from you, none of it asking you to be awake or alert or attentive. You have done your day. Whatever it contained, whatever it required of you, it is done now, and the night is here, and the night is long and quiet and entirely yours. There is nothing to prepare for. There is nothing to remember. There is only this warmth and this darkness, and the slow and easy rhythm of your breathing, and the distant, fading warmth of a city that lived and breathed and baked its bread and pressed its olives and mended its linens and ate its simple meals and lay down to sleep on a summer night 2,000 years ago, and whose quietness is somehow still here, still present, like a warmth that has never entirely left the stone. Sleep now. Let everything go. The city is sleeping. The water runs. The moon moves. The bread will rise again in the morning. But morning is very far away. And you are here. And it is quiet. And it is warm. And you are safe. The night deepens over the city. Each hour that passes is quieter than the one before. The last footsteps in the street have long since faded. The last voice has long since gone silent. The last lamp in the last doorway has burned down to a very small flame that bends once, barely, in a breath of night air, and then steadies and burns on. In the rooms of the Insula, in all the small apartments stacked one above another, everyone is sleeping. The thin wooden floors and ceilings carry no sound now, no footstep, no voice, no creak of a chair or scrape of a pot. Just the deep, collective silence of sleeping people, the silence of bodies that have been busy all day and are now completely still, breathing their slow, deep, unconscious breaths, their minds gone somewhere that is not here, not the city, not the room, not the warm summer night, but somewhere else entirely, somewhere without address or direction. The water in the channel runs on. It has been running all through these hours without pause or variation, the same soft, continuous sound it makes at every hour of the day and night, the sound that is always there, that is simply part of what the street sounds like, that the people who live here do not hear anymore because it has become part of the silence for them, part of the texture of their sleep. The cat from the garden wall is somewhere in the dark now, perhaps on a rooftop, perhaps in a doorway, perhaps asleep in some narrow shadow between buildings. The dog from the doorway earlier is somewhere in the street, moving slowly through the empty lanes of the night city, its paws silent on the worn stone. The donkeys in the stable are still and warm. They're breathing the slow, deep breathing of large animals in deep sleep. Let your breathing be that slow. Let it be that deep. Let your body be as still as the sleeping city, as heavy as the warm stone of the buildings, as quiet as the empty street in the last hour of the night. There is no distance between you and this quietness. There is no effort required to reach it. It is simply here, the way the warmth of the stone is simply here, the way the sound of the water is simply here, present and continuous and entirely without demand. Your mind can go anywhere it wants now. It can go into the city, into the warm apartment, into the dim and shuttered room where Lucia and her husband sleep their deep and unremarkable sleep. It can wander the empty streets in the hour before dawn, when the night is at its deepest and the city is at its most still. It can go somewhere that has no address at all, somewhere that is simply warm and quiet and without edges, the place that sleep opens into, the place that is always there, always waiting, always the same, soft and dark and entirely without urgency or demand. The first light of the next day is still hours away. The baker will not rise for a long time yet. The lamps will not be lit for a long time. The market will not open, the streets will not fill, the water will not be drawn from the well, the bread will not be made for a long time. For now there is only the night, and the quiet, and the slow turning of the earth, and the stars moving in their ancient arcs above the rooftops, and the water running in its channel, and the sleeping city breathing its great, slow, collective breath of rest. You are part of that breath now. Your breathing is part of it. Your stillness is part of it. You are as much a part of the quiet of this night as the stone and the water and the sleeping people and the moving stars, all of it simply continuing, all of it simply being, all of it simply going on in the way that things go on when there is nothing to interfere, nothing to interrupt, nothing to ask for anything other than the continuation of this deep and ordinary peace. The night, the quiet, the warmth in the stone, the water running, the stars above the rooftops, the sleeping city, your breathing, in and out, in and out, so slow, so easy, so completely without effort. The lamp in the distant doorway burns its small flame. The moon has passed its highest point and is descending now, slowly, toward the western rooftops. In the bakery, the banked fire breathes its low, patient breath. The flour waits in its sacks. The morning will come, in its time, at its own pace, without being hurried or invited or asked. But it is not here yet. It is very far away. And the night is long. And the quiet is deep. And you are warm. And you are still. And there is nothing. Nothing at all. Except this. The warmth. The dark. The slow breath. In and out. In and out. The city sleeps. You sleep. Everything is well. Everything is very, very well.